My parents said they couldn't afford to take me on the family vacation. And a week later, my mother posted a picture on Facebook with the caption, "Our family and our beloved daughter with her new boyfriend. The family is united." I didn't react. A week later, when they had an emergency, they came to beg for help. I cut them off. So, I'm Marta. I'm 27 years old, and I rent a one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Alicante. I work as a freelance writer for a digital content agency, almost always from home. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and gives me something very valuable: distance from my family, a family I thought I had finally made peace with. It turned out I was simply ignoring the obvious. It all started less than a month ago in mid-March. I was at my parents' house for dinner, something I do every 2 weeks, more out of habit than affection. My sister, Patricia, was also there. She's 26 and still lives at home, spoiled, but subtly. You only notice it if you've lived alongside her for 2 decades. She doesn't get everything she wants, only everything that really matters. We were sitting at the table when my mother started talking about a trip they were planning. A cabin resort in Riaza, something like rustic river style, but with luxury. She had printed the brochure and everything. They were going hiking, disconnecting from the world, maybe horseback riding. A complete plan. I casually asked if I could go. I hadn't had a vacation in years. I thought it might be good for everyone to spend time together, just once. My mother looked at me with that pitying face. Then she started explaining that things were tight this year, that the cabin only had space for 4 people, and that after paying taxes, the money wouldn't stretch. She didn't want me to feel pressured to pay my share because she knew rent was expensive and all that. I didn't insist, I just said, okay, no problem. That night, I left their house without being angry. Just numb. I kept telling myself, maybe I misinterpreted. Maybe it really is about the money. Maybe they really thought they were saving me the expense. A week later, I was working late in my apartment. It was around 9:30 p.m. I took a break and checked Facebook. My mother had posted a picture. Her, my father, Patricia, and Bruno, my sister's boyfriend, standing on a cliff in Segovia, hugging and smiling like in a Christmas ad. The caption read, "Our family and our beloved daughter with her new boyfriend. Family united." I didn't know what hurt more, that they had gone without me or that they took Bruno and called him family. Bruno had only been dating Patricia for 2 months. He was new, quiet, one of those who say, "Pleased to meet you," and mean it. I liked him. I still like him, which makes it worse. Because if they had asked me if it was okay to take him, I probably would have said yes. But they didn't. They just replaced me. I didn't say anything, not to them, not to Bruno, not in the comments on the post. I just swallowed it and let it burn a hole inside me. A week after their return, it was Monday night. I had finished dinner and was watching something on Alex when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it and there they were, Lola, Tomas, and Patricia, standing in the hallway, shattered. Their hair was messy, their eyes sunken, as if they hadn't slept in days. I didn't even greet them, I just waited. My mother started talking immediately, something about how everything had fallen apart quickly, that their SUV had been stolen and abandoned in a parking lot with the engine stripped. That Tomas had invested money, borrowed money from his own retirement, I learned later, in a business with an old friend that turned out to be a scam. And Patricia had tried to help by paying some expenses with her credit card. Now it was maxed out and she was panicking. They needed help, just for a while, a place to stay, maybe a small loan until things stabilized. I told them no. Not tentatively no, not because I didn't have space, not because I couldn't help, but because they had already shown me exactly where I stood. They looked at me as if I had just thrown them out into the street in the middle of winter. Then they left without saying another word. I didn't hear from them for several days. A few days passed, and then everything began to unravel in a direction I didn't see coming. 2 days after I turned them away, silence arrived. No calls, no messages, no emails. It felt strange at first. My mother, the queen of guilt-laden group messages and constant check-ins, suddenly disappeared. Patricia wasn't even posting on social media. That was already weird. Her usual stories of brunches, selfies with the dog, or blurry sunsets had vanished. I admit, for a moment I thought maybe they were just embarrassed, that maybe this would be the wake-up call we all needed, that we would calm down and talk like adults. But I underestimated them again. Friday morning, I received a message from Bruno. It was short, just "Can we talk?" I replied yes. That same afternoon, he came to my house. He looked exhausted, as if carrying a weight he didn't know how to hold. He sat down, didn't even touch the drink I offered him, and then he told me everything. He said he didn't know that I hadn't been invited on the trip, that he assumed I was busy with work or couldn't go. He said he felt terrible seeing my face after reading the Facebook post, that he actually didn't want to go on the trip in the first place, but Patricia insisted. Then he told me that he wanted out, not just of the conversation, he wanted out of the relationship. He had been living with them for a week, ever since I told them no. They dragged him into their mess. They made him use his savings to buy food. They told him it would only be temporary. My mother cornered him the night before and asked him what his long-term intentions were with Patricia. Then she suggested marriage. Children. She even pulled out a photo album from when Patricia was a baby, as if that was going to convince him. Bruno was horrified. He told me he hadn't even been with her long enough to meet her extended family, let alone plan for children. He said it felt like he had joined a cult. So he broke up with Patricia, packed his bags, and left that same morning. That's when everything started to change. Sunday morning, I received a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, it was Tomas. It was the first time he had contacted me directly since they showed up at my door. The message was cold, no apologies, no explanations, just "You've made your choice. We'll make ours without you." I didn't give it much thought at first, until Monday arrived. I went out to go to the supermarket, keys in hand, and froze when I saw my car windshield. Smeared with what looked like oil or paint, someone had written on the glass, "Family doesn't abandon family." There was no note, no witnesses. I filed a report. The police told me they checked the cameras in the area, but I already knew. No one would be caught. That same day, my bank account was blocked for suspicious activity. Someone had tried to access it from the area where my father lives. I thought, probably just a coincidence. I didn't call them, I didn't confront them. Instead, I started planning. If they wanted conflict, they would know that this time I wouldn't stay quiet. But in my own way, and they wouldn't see it coming. After the windshield incident, I stopped pretending this would resolve itself. I didn't call the police anymore. I didn't wait. Instead, I went quiet and started investigating. I knew Tomas had limits he didn't want crossed. People he owed money to, things he didn't want on paper, and it didn't take me long to find one of them. In 2022, he had used my social security number as a cosigner on a loan. I only discovered it because of a random credit check I did last year. I confronted him at the time. He played dumb until I threatened to contact a lawyer. He begged me to let it go. He said he would pay it off and close it. I never saw any proof that he did, and I didn't do anything until now. I saw an opportunity. I called the financial institution and told them the truth. I told them I never signed anything. I sent them an affidavit and a letter from a lawyer friend who owed me a favor. The account is now under investigation. Its balance has increased. Interest has been frozen, and he's been prohibited from any credit-related activity until it's resolved. 3 days later, Lola sent me a picture via message. It was a letter from the bank. Then she called me. I didn't answer. She left me a voicemail. She was crying. She asked me why I was doing this to them. Lola said we were family and that family forgives. I didn't reply. That same night, Patricia posted an Instagram story. Black screen, white text, "Betrayal always makes the most noise when it comes from who you trust." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was desperate. The next day, I went to see someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. My grandfather, Tomas's father, lives in a small town about 40 minutes away. I always liked him. He wasn't anything like my father, quiet, sharp. He had that dry way of saying things that made people nervous. He was one of those who didn't talk much, but when they did, everyone listened. When I arrived at his house, he opened the door, looked at me for a long time, and said, "You took your time." We sat on the porch. I told him everything. Not just what they had done to me now, but what they had done to me for years. How it always revolved around them and Patricia. How I was only useful when everything fell apart. He didn't say much, just sat there listening. When I told him about the windshield, about the loan, how they came to me with fake apologies after lying to my face, he leaned back and let out a dry chuckle. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You know, in 45, people like your father didn't live long. Too talkative, no word, capable of betrayal for convenience." I didn't know what to say. Then he added, "Let them come crawling if they want, but don't let them forget the mud on their knees." He offered his help in his own way. He said he still had some friends who could pull strings if necessary. I told him not yet, but I didn't tell him no. The next morning, I received another message from Lola. This time it was different. She said they wanted to meet, just to talk, clear things up. She said it would just be the three of us, her, Tomas, and me. They didn't know I already had other plans for that day, and they certainly didn't know I had invited someone else. We met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. Neutral ground. Not too public, but not a place where they could corner me either. I chose the table in the back. I was already seated when they arrived. Lola, Tomas, and Patricia. No Bruno this time, he was already off the map, just the original trio. They sat down as if it were a family dinner. Lola tried to smile. Tomas looked annoyed before even speaking. Patricia was wearing sunglasses, probably for dramatic effect. They didn't order anything. They went straight to the point. Lola started talking about family, forgiveness, misunderstandings, and inopportune moments. Tomas remained silent, which wasn't like him. He usually played the victim, but that day he looked like someone who had something to lose. That was new. They offered to forget everything. If I stopped escalating the conflict, they said things were bad enough without me adding fuel to the fire. I replied that I wasn't adding anything, I was just tired of pretending. And then I dropped something else, something I had been waiting to say. "By the way," I said, "remember that small business loan you applied for with the Veterans Assistance? The one where you doubled your income and declared you were on active duty?" Tomas's face froze. I leaned forward. "I sent them the real figures and a copy of your army discharge." Lola's mouth opened as if to say something, but nothing came out. I wasn't lying. My grandfather had given me the documents. He said he kept them in case Tomas ever tried to pull something with the Ministry of Defense again. And he did. And now he was being investigated for fraud. I stood up, ready to leave. That's when Baltazar walked in. He wasn't invited to sit, he just stood at the end of the table, arms crossed. Tomas looked at him as if he'd seen a ghost. Baltazar didn't say anything at first, just looked at his son the way you look at something disappointing you can't return. Then he spoke, loud enough to be heard from the other tables. "You always thought you were smarter than everyone else. You never understood that being smart doesn't mean being honest." Then he turned to me, smiled faintly, and added, "I'm glad she didn't turn out like him." And then he left. I left too. The consequences began almost immediately. 3 days later, Tomas's loan application was officially frozen, pending investigation. His business partner backed out of a deal, probably because he heard rumors from someone who knew someone. Lola posted a long status on Facebook, an emotional outburst saying that families should forgive each other, not destroy each other. Patricia uploaded a picture of herself crying, followed by a quote about how people show their true colors in difficult times. I didn't comment. I didn't answer the more than 20 calls that came afterward either. Instead, I took another step. There was a family trust. Baltazar had created it a long time ago, something small but stable, something to leave to his grandchildren someday. Tomas had been trying to quietly convince him to transfer it all to Patricia's name. I told him, I'm not interested in the family wealth. That week, I sat down with my grandfather again. I didn't even have to mention it. He told me he had already changed the papers. Patricia was out and Tomas's name removed completely. He laughed as he told me, your father was always good at pretending to be a hero until someone read the script. The next message I received from my parents wasn't a voicemail, it was a legal notification. Apparently they were considering suing me. That's when I decided it was time to stop playing defense. The notification wasn't serious, not really. It was a standard letter written by some local lawyer they probably found online, but it said enough. My parents were willing to cross the line. They thought they could scare me into backing down. What they didn't know was that I was already preparing, quietly, methodically. I had two goals: to expose each of their lies without a trace, and to make sure they faced the consequences of their actions. The first step was public. I created a folder, screenshots, documents, data, text messages, all the times they used me, lied to me, took things from me, proof of the loan in my name, messages from Patricia guilting me into helping her with her debts, the Ministry of Defense fraud papers that Baltazar had kept, photos of the broken windshield, and the message Tomas left me after I told them no, everything. And I posted it, not as a dramatic confession, just as an entry titled, "This is what a family looks like when you're only useful in a crisis." I uploaded it to a community forum we all belong to, local, tight-knit, full of neighbors who love gossip. The kind of place where Tomas had always tried to project the image of a respectable man and exemplary father. Within a few hours it started circulating. People commented. Some shared their own stories. A few recognized my father's name and weren't surprised. By the morning, two things had happened. First, Lola deleted her Facebook. Every single post removed. Second, Tomas lost his volunteer position on the local business council. Someone had forwarded my post. But I wasn't finished. I contacted the collection agency linked to Patricia's credit card debt. I told them where she worked. Now I also sent them a list of purchases she had made with Bruno's card, the one he had given me after their breakup. Designer bags, concert tickets, a spa retreat. All in the same week they claimed to be barely surviving. He was happy to collaborate. They froze her account. By the end of the week, she called me 6 times in one night. I didn't answer. But the real blow came later. Thomas was trying to start a new business, something related to property management. It wasn't up and running yet, but I found his limited company application registered online. Lola was listed as the second director. So I called a friend who works in real estate law. The company hadn't completed its urban planning permits, and guess what? There were discrepancies in the documentation, wrong addresses, misreported income, enough to trigger a delay and a formal review. In 3 days, the city council froze the application and opened an investigation. I didn't tell them it was me, but they knew. This time they sent me an email. No threats, no legal language, just 2 words. Why, Marta? I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the legal letter they had sent me. I took it to Baltazar's house and handed it to him personally. He read it, then poured 2 glasses of bourbon. One for him, one for me. Baltazar raised his glass and said, "Your father was always good at promising things he never delivered. Too bad he never learned to collect them." Then he added, "They've done enough damage for now, but if they come back, we'll shut the door on them properly." I nodded. We drank. And then I started working on the final step. Because the house they lived in wasn't really theirs. It was my grandfather's. And they were about to find out what it felt like to pack their bags in a hurry. 2 weeks after the city council froze Tomas's business account, everything began to collapse faster than I expected. It turns out, when you build your life on borrowed money, falsified documents, and feigned charm, all it takes is a good push. That push was me. The city council flagged their tax returns. An audit was opened, and someone, probably that retired accountant Baltazar knew, gave an anonymous tip to the local press. They published a small article about mismanaged funds and dubious claims of veterans' assistance. They didn't mention names, but everyone in town knew who they were talking about. One by one, their investors pulled out, not out of ethical principles, but because they smelled smoke and didn't want to get burned. And then came the real blow. Tomas had taken out a second mortgage on the house where he lived with Lola, only the house wasn't legally his, it was still in Baltazar's name, something he conveniently forgot. When he tried to use falsified documents to back the loan, the bank called and Baltazar answered. And instead of covering for him, he handed over the real deed. That's when my grandfather made his final move. He modified the trust. Officially, legally, the house and the land it stood on went to the family trust, but with only one name on it. Mine. Not Patricia, not Lola, not even a clause for Tomas. They were given 30 days to leave. They didn't fight it, at least not publicly. But the last week before they had to leave, something strange happened. I received a message from a woman I didn't know. She said she had been Tomas's assistant when he ran a chain of dealerships, his only semi-successful period years ago. She said she had seen everything that happened and thought I should know something. It turned out that Tomas had another son. Not recently, years ago, a half-brother, the result of an affair he had while Lola was pregnant with Patricia. I didn't know what to do with that information. I still don't. But somehow it all fit. The way he treated Patricia like a queen, the way he treated me as if I'd barely existed. As if I were the reminder that he didn't run fast enough. I didn't tell Patricia, and I don't think I will. The last day before the eviction, my parents didn't say a word. They were packing boxes. Patricia was crying. She was writing cryptic phrases about being betrayed by your own blood. Lola looked like someone who had aged 10 years in a week. And Tomas just looked tired. Before leaving, he left a note in Baltazar's mailbox. I never got to see it. My grandfather threw it into the brazier fire without reading it. When I asked him what it said, he replied, I don't care. I've been reading his excuses for 30 years. Now they live in a rented house on the outskirts of town. I've been told Tomas is trying to get consulting jobs with some friend who doesn't know anything. Patricia is working in a store again. Lola is quiet, too quiet. I visit Baltazar once a week. We sit on the porch, drink coffee. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we just listen to the silence. Once, he took out an old pocket knife and gave it to me. I thought it was a sentimental gesture, but instead he said, this was my father's. He used it to cut ropes when the barn caught fire in '42. Sometimes you have to cut things before they drag you down with them. Then he smiled with that crooked grin of a stubborn old man. You did good, Marta. You didn't just get up, you finished it. And he was right. My father still sends me an email every month. Always from a new address, always with the same tone. Remorse disguised as bitterness. I never reply. I don't need revenge anymore because I already won. My life was starting to feel stable. I was dating someone new, working towards a promotion. I was even considering adopting a dog. I hadn't heard from my parents in weeks, which was unusual considering Tomas's streak of monthly guilt-laden emails. And then one arrived. But it wasn't from him. It was from a lawyer, and not one of those mediocre ones pulled from cheap websites. This was a real estate lawyer from out of the province. The subject line of the email said, Urgent, regarding property purchase by Mr. Tomas, full last name. I opened it thinking it was spam. It wasn't. Apparently, Tomas had bought a small plot of land outside of town. Not in his name. He had used a shell company with someone else as director, someone he had worked with decades ago. It was remote land, just trees and dirt, no services, no permits. But the most shocking thing was this. He had submitted plans to build a self-sufficient cabin. Off-grid living, all hidden in the documents. No public address. The lawyer didn't know who I was at first. He said he had been hired to manage the permits. He found my name by accident while cross-checking data from Baltazar's trust. Something related to boundary disputes and overlapping zones. The properties were close. Tomas wanted to go live there, alone, out of everyone's reach, completely isolated. I didn't know what to think. That wasn't like him. He liked the public, the applause, the control. But this seemed like the exit plan of a man who knew he had no cards left to play. I didn't tell Baltazar anything at first. I thought maybe it was better he didn't know, but then last week he called me to his house. He had that look again, like he already had a story written in his head. I got a call, he said. An old friend mentioned, your son has been snooping around the land registry office, asking about boundary changes, building permits, trying to redraw maps quietly. I nodded and told him what I had discovered. He didn't say anything for a long time, just nodded back. Then he said, you know why he's doing it, right? I shrugged. He's not trying to disappear, he continued. He's waiting for us to lower our guard, for everyone to cool down, and then he'll come back with that fake face of humility. Baltazar took out a small envelope and handed it to me. Inside was a deed, but not to our property. It was for the land right next to the one Tomas had just bought. My grandfather had bought it a week earlier through a third party. He looked at me and smiled mischievously. If he wants to disappear into the woods, he said, he'll have to look at my house every morning. I didn't even ask how he'd done it, but a part of me knew this wasn't over. My father wasn't planning to disappear, he was planning to come back, and this time it wouldn't be publicly. It would be slow, silent, manipulative, just like him. But now we're watching him, and he has no idea.